Coach Peggy Show, all things wellness with Coach Peggy Willms. How many people in your life have told you you're half of this or half of that? Are you settling? No more. This show is about all things, and you deserve it. It's about your money, your lifestyle, your beliefs, and even romance. We extinguish excuses and raise the bar to all things possible. It's time to use your ATM, your all things mindset. Welcome to the Coach Peggy Show. Bold, badass, and never half in.
Hey, you guys, welcome. I'm your host, Peggy Willms, and we talk all things wellness and well-being here. And I'm going to start with my spiel. We are real people with real problems, finding real solutions, and ultimately we are telling real stories. In today's show, you're going to want to hang out because it's really cool, talking about personal and professional boundaries. What? And I want to start out with a quote. You guys know I always start out with a quote and a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, I want you to stay tuned at the half-hour mark. We're going to come back with some lightning round questions, which are always fun and unrehearsed and unscripted. And I'm going to have a giveaway. And then you're going to find out how to reach these amazing ladies. So make sure you stay tuned. And now I'm going to tell you, we are going to share their personal stories. They've both recently been published in a best-selling compilation book called Win the Wellness War. Rachelle, Dr. Sweet, has also written a best-selling book. It's a compilation book as well with some epidemiologists and really cool people. And then Evelyn she's TED Talking now. She's TED Talking all over the place. So let's bring these ladies on. I'm going to start with a quick quote. As Dalai Lama says, if you are honest, truthful, and transparent, people trust you. And if people trust you, you have no grounds for fear, suspicion, or jealousy. And that's what we're talking about. How transparent are you at work today? Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. I'm excited to talk about this because I think it's one of those topics that back in the day, and I'll just say personally for myself, as a health and wellness coach, or, when you're in corporate America and you're talking to leadership and boards of directors, you really don't know how transparent to be, especially as a health and wellness coach, I think, or even a physician, with you, Dr. Rachelle, it's like, how much do you talk about that is personal? So for instance, for me, do I really tell my clients if I'm struggling with sleep or I'm struggling with my eating issues because I'm saying to them, I got it figured out and come work with me, that borderline of how transparent are you about your personal struggles? And I really think post-COVID, I'm going to reach out there. I think we are really understanding that it's the stories and the connections that we had to learn during that time that it's not putting us it doesn't feel like the risk it used to feel like in sharing stories. Hello, Dr. Rachelle. Dr. Rachelle Sweet. Hello. Welcome. Hailing from New Hampshire. And we've got Evelyn down here hailing from Nevada. So welcome, you guys. I'm going to do something that you guys don't do very well yourselves. What is that? I'm going to brag about you. So here's where we start with the good old bios. You guys know that. So Evelyn Knight. She is an engaging speaker and leader expert in early childhood education, the big old ECE. She specializes in helping leaders navigate the business of childcare while making sure children come first. Evelyn is the CEO and founder of Childcare Business Professionals, which has helped hundreds of people, hundreds of ECE leaders. That's so awesome. She is a host of the Childcare Business Coach podcast and has been a successful childcare owner for a decade. She has hosted many TED Talks, and additionally, Evelyn was a full-time nurse. We're going to talk about this to her terminally ill husband while she's been running 2 companies. So let's hold on there, Evelyn. Good job, brag. And Dr. Rachelle Sweet. Rachelle's background is in neuropsychology, health coaching, and genetics. So she evaluates epigenetic blueprints to guide stressed, tired women to achieve more energy, clarity in their life, confidence, all of that fun stuff. But she maximizes clients' results by using genetics as a guide and understanding biological individuality. Sounds so amazing. She's also a best-selling author. She came out with her book, as I said earlier. It is called Expressive Origins. All right, enough bragging. Hello.
Hello.
Back at you. All right, so today's show is talking about those professional and personal boundaries because we really want anybody listening, and this isn't just a female conversation. However, I'm going to put myself on the line right here. I think women, I'll say for myself, I think women do a little bit better job expressing our emotions and what's going on inside because we have our pals and we go have coffee or we go for a hike or something. And I learned during COVID working with a gentleman that was 18 and a gentleman that was 22. That's when I really learned, you know what? They struggle with emotions and personal life and that boundary. So you guys, Rachel, you wrote a personal story. So the compilation book, When the Wellness Worked, is available out on Amazon, and it had almost 40 authors, and they're true and personal stories. So heart, spirit, mind, body, true personal stories. So you wrote a personal story in that book. And tell us a little bit about what the story was about and what that experience was for you to get that particular story out.
Yeah. Well, it was a little bit of a different story. It was because a lot of times when we're talking about boundaries, people think about, maybe like, personal boundaries, but this is kind of professional. Like I talked about professional boundaries a little bit, and it's really to do with taking on a lot of responsibility. Sometimes, you know, when you're a person who is really cares about other people, maybe your love language, right, is acts of
Right.
service.
Right.
You tend to take on a lot of acts of service for other people and really burn the candle at both ends doing that. And I found myself in a situation where I was working in a family business and, I kind of just gave up myself to really work that and provide that business everything in me. And it made me sick in the end. And, you know, from that, I really learned that at some point, like they say on the plane, you have to put your oxygen mask on
Mhm.
and treat yourself first before you can help anybody else. And I realized that if I'm not around, if I'm not healthy, how am I going to keep giving in that way? And an unfortunate eye-opening event that happened for me, but it was really the story that I told was more about taking on too much responsibility. We
Right.
are responsible for a lot of things that we do in our life, but there is also taking on too much responsibility, that it's
Exactly.
a detriment to yourself.
So did you get to the place where you no longer could make the decision on how busy you were or what you were taking on because your body and everything said, hey, time out,
Ev-
girlfriend, right?
yeah, eventually. So it started off with kind of like the typical burnout, like
Mhm.
I started to disengage from things. I didn't have enough time for other people. You start to feel just tired all the time. You just want to go home and veg. So that, sometimes I would go home. It was quite an active job. So sometimes I go home and legs aching and in pain and, get up the next day and just do the same thing 7 days a week. Felt like I couldn't take the day off. Felt guilty for taking a day off,
Right.
because
No, that's right.
I wasn't there. And eventually put myself in the hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
So my body said, yeah, enough of that.
the vessel doesn't lie, right, Evelyn?
No,
It's like
absolutely.
I found that a million times with myself. I think everybody at some certain level has, whether you get injured, a gentleman might get injured twisting his ankle at work because you stop paying attention to red flags and those things
Yeah.
around you, and you hurry and you skip appointments, and so the vessel
Mhm.
just eventually says, like,
Yeah.
peace out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Evelyn, can
It
you
took a
go
few
ahead?
years. Sorry, I was gonna say
No,
it
no.
just took a few years. Um, but yeah, it ended up where I was actually I could have died based on what happened to me health medically. Yeah.
How long did it take you to circle back around and, to get healthy? Because you had to seek some medical time or whatever. How long did it take before you really started to change those behaviors, those habits? So the next time around we were a little bit improved. Takes a while.
Yeah, it does. It takes a lot because it's
Mhm.
a real mental shift.
Yeah.
Because it had been who I was for all my whole life.
It's almost an identity thing, isn't it?
It
And
is absolutely.
I think Evelyn's shaking her head. So I think that for me, one of the most unfortunate things I think is that society really does commend those who are workaholics, those who work 70 hours a week, and how does she balance the kids? Or Evelyn has a couple of businesses, and it's like, we can't stop that ball from rolling because they're like, it's almost a proud thing, right? Evelyn, you can relate to what Rachel's saying right now, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I actually, very similar story, but a little bit different for me. I think it was my own business, and I think it was more my trust issues that didn't allow me to create boundaries and delegate. It came down honestly to delegation. I was in the mindset that if it's going to be done right, I have to do it. Nobody can do it like me. I can't. And I was in that mindset of like, why don't they get it? Why you placing blame instead of looking internally? I was looking externally. Right. And so very similar, I ended up coming down with a neurological disease. I actually have narcolepsy with cataplexy, which I know is genetic. And apparently I've had it my whole life, but it was dormant. But I pushed and pushed and pushed myself to the point that I was like, I would work so much, I would pass out at work and just, okay, I just needed a quick cat nap. Now I'm back, and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And, but I also had to be super mom, because society tells us we have to be super mom too. So I'm still trying to make sure that everything is homemade, and I'm showing up for everything at the school, and I'm the best business owner, and I've got to be successful. And I also have to show up for my husband. So next thing I knew, I was uncontrollably sleeping 20 hours a day, and life just was going on without me, and the guilt and the shame behind it. And it just shut down. And getting medical attention for something like narcolepsy is very difficult because it's something that doctors overlook all the time. And thank God I finally had a doctor who decided to do a DNA panel, found that I was positive for both strains. And that's when they figured out, they did the testing, and I was sure fit narcoleptic. And so really, it was almost like, I'm a God girl, and I really do feel like it was, whether you believe in the universe or whatever, but it was God's way of telling me, stop.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't do this.
Good point.
And it forced me to find that balance in life and to rely on other people. But it's like I had a redo a couple of years later, when I learned how to balance the narcolepsy. I learned how to live with it. And I'm actually medication free, which is amazing for a narcoleptic, but I've got a very strict schedule, very strict regimen of napping and exercise and diet and whatnot. But then when my husband became terminally ill, he was in and out of the hospital. So it was just constant hospital visits and hospital visits. And again, I found myself in this situation where I was just pushing and pushing, and I wouldn't ask for help. And there was this one incident that happened that just really woke me up to the fact that we need people. And my husband was in the hospital, and it was just a really bad day when we found out that he wasn't going to be eligible for a kidney transplant. And I was leaving the hospital. I would stay until the nurses threw me out. So this day they were telling me it was time to go. So it was pretty late at night. And I went out to the parking garage, and I found my car had a flat tire. And I was so angry. And I just was like, why didn't I learn how to change my own flat? And I literally sat on the floor in that parking garage, and I just started to cry. And I started to cry because I couldn't do it myself. Not because I had a flat tire, but because I was so mad at myself because I never learned how to change my own tire. And now I had to call for help. And that I was literally livid with myself because I needed help.
Wow.
And ironically, I called my AAA, and they just said, oh, it's going to be about 2 hours. And it's like, okay, I guess I just have to sit here. And I had this ping, this little voice in my head saying, call your friend. And there was a specific friend. This voice was telling me, call your friend, call your friend. They'll be here for you. They'll be here. But I wouldn't do it. So instead, I sat on that garage floor for 2 hours. Monday morning, I was talking to that particular friend. This happened on a Friday. Monday morning, I was like, oh my gosh. It turns out that her husband happened to be a block away from me. while I was sitting on that floor crying and feeling sorry for myself. And had I just picked up the phone and said, hey, I got this feeling, I need to call you, he could have been there in 5 minutes. He could have changed my tire. Everything could have been different. But my inability to be able to say, I need help, put me in this position. And it was just like this, okay, Evelyn,
Isn't that
do you not
amazing?
remember what happened 8 years ago? And when I was first diagnosed with narcolepsy, I was so embarrassed by it that I actually ended up becoming agoraphobic. And I had to get some pretty intense treatment to be able to just leave my house. And, you know, and I'm sitting there that Monday thinking to myself, you've overcome agoraphobia. You have done all these things, and you know, it's because of your pride and ego.
That's right.
Here you are again, allowing your ego to take over. And that's when I really, truly learned in my businesses and in my life, the power of delegation and allowing people to step in for you.
I think you bring up a million good points. I think Rachel and I are like, you know, we're getting head rock here. It's delegation and asking for help. We do that type of thing when we're like up to we're like 8 years old, and then pretty soon we're coached and coaxed that that's not like super cool. Do it yourself, work really hard, figure it out. And it's unfortunate that it seems like it takes a breakdown to have a breakthrough. And, you know, unfortunately, and then we spend a year or two trying to come back through all sorts of other different, you know, things we could have been trying before. Hey, go talk to somebody. Hey, go have a massage. Hey, ask somebody to read your emails, those types of things. But when you look back, okay, so let's bounce off of Evelyn's story, Rachel. When you look back, you had issues with delegation too. So both of your stories, personal stories that were published. When you look back at the delegation piece, and don't tell me like your age or something, but maybe you weren't 21, was yours ego pride like most people with training others or delegating or trusting others? Was it?
Yeah, trust, the big thing.
Trust.
When Evelyn said trust, that was the biggest thing. I definitely resonated with Evelyn when she said about, you know, if it's to be, it's up to me, right? That was, I think, my quote that I put on that story. Like, if we're going to get this done, I'm the one that has to do it. No one else can do this. And even my staff would say, you know, sometimes in meetings, like, oh, we need to help you. And I just had such a hard time with that. And it just that, you know, the need to control and not being able to let go of that. That was the biggest thing for me, is that need for control.
How far back can you remember that wanting to control it? And because it's a fear factor too. I mean, that's one of the emotions, right, that pop up. But
yeah, I don't know that I recognized it so much until
the other side of it.
probably, you know, into my 30s. But you know, certainly it was, if I think about it, it was probably there before that.
When we're like 7, you know, 4 to 7, age 4 to 7 is where it all happens. That's the sweet spot. So the delegation piece, when your coworkers, we're really good little minions, for lack of a better term, you know, little working out awesome in the mailroom. I mean, when you look about, we're talking again today about professional and personal boundaries and kind of how much do you share in those environments. The reason we're building up to that is I wanted to make sure that these gals shared their personal stories, some of their real personal stories. I mean, Evelyn's was even about taking care of her very ill husband of decades, which we'll get into here in a little bit too. But I think that part of it is when you're not sitting in the C-suite or your upper level management, which has its own, its own image and blah, 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 playing that game. There are really cool, intimate type relationships on the middle management and worker B levels. I mean, they know each other's kids' names, they know what they did last night, and it's not that superficial type relationship. But as a business owner, you know, both you guys have been there, are there. It's tough when you have client or patients to be like, yo, you know, I ate a bag of Doritos every single day for the last week, but you have diabetes. So you know, what are your thoughts, Evelyn?
It's lonely. And it's something I actually teach
That's a
on.
good point.
Yeah, I teach leaders all the time because it's such a fine line between being personal, building relationships, because it is so important that we're human. And I have made the mistake of trying to separate myself from my staff and be the superhuman person who had to be perfect and had to look perfect and all the things all the time, right?
Mhm.
And there was no personal relationship there. And I realized at one point, I'm just building resentment. I'm just and I'm building this. Well, and the other big thing is I've come to realize over the years is that everybody knew it was fake. Everyone knew.
See, that's what's so
yeah,
funny.
they knew. I thought, I mean, there was a point in my life where I thought I was fooling everybody, but now I realize, yeah, they just all thought I was fake then. And I realized there was a point where I had to be real, but you can't be their friend either, because it is hard to fire someone's friend. And, it is just so hard.
So true.
So you have to be this mentor, is what you really have to do, where you get this relationship as a mentor, where you're still personal with them. You still share certain things, and you let them share everything and you guide. But one of the things I always tell the people I coach is you can never vent down, right? You always have to vent up. And so if it's one of your frustrations, especially professionally, it can never go down. Now, when it came to my husband, my staff wanted to help so much. And so those were the things that I could come to them with. I didn't get into like very intimate details, but I was able to come to them and just say, hey, it was a rough weekend. Ron spent the whole weekend in the hospital. I might need to take the day off today. And they would automatically jump in, like, what can we do? Tell us what to do. And they were more than happy. And it's actually created more loyal staff that trust me more now. So, but at the same time, there's other things that you really can't share, because you've got to stay on that mentorship level when you're in that upper management.
That's a good point. I heard something somewhere where it said that, when you are open and transparent with coworkers, employees, patients, clients, whatever, is to think about if you stepped out of the room and it was all being videotaped, think about who the audience might be. And it's like, are you adding to the rumor mill? Are you adding value? Are you, and sharing, like you said, Evelyn, sharing certain levels of it. Everybody stepping up and seeing you as a human being is like, right? Duh. Because what happened with me specifically is the anger was building. And the best example I can give is after the hurricane, we had Hurricane Ian, not be our house. Yeah. And when we finally got power and we came back around, and I opened up my phone because I couldn't tell anybody I was even alive for 4.5 days. And you open it up. And for me, I've never worried about if people were listening out there or following me. Like, that never bothered me. But when I opened it up and I looked at my texts, my emails, any posts, there were 27 people. It's international news. And I sat there and I cried for about 35 minutes. And I thought, what? I work 17 hours a day and this is what I get. And then I realized, Peggy, you're only mad at yourself. These guys think that you've got it all handled and you're ticked off because you've never asked, but it's all All right, you guys, we're going to come back and talk more about this. We're going to talk about what do we share at work? And then we're going to have a lightning round. So you're watching the Coach Peggy Show. Make sure you come right back. Hey, you guys, thank you so much for coming back. We're talking to Dr. Rachelle Sweet and Evelyn Knight here. We're talking about the personal stories that we might share, like what's too much at work, or how much do you share that doesn't put you at risk for maybe your employees look up to you. Maybe you're a physician, maybe you're the president of a company. So we're kind of chit-chatting about that, but I promised you that we'd go through a lightning round, which is always fun. I just ask random questions to these lovely guests of mine. And sometimes I pull on my producer, which, Sarah, I'll be doing that. All right, you guys. So excuse me. Evelyn, I'm handing you $1 million, but I'm requiring that you spend at least half of it on either a cause, a person, or something. What would you do with that moolah?
Oh, that's so easy. I'm actually in I'm actually in the process of creating a foundation. So I would definitely put it into my foundation, where my passion in life is trying to provide quality research-based early child care and education for children under 5 years old, for all children. And I'm on a mission to make sure that at least 1 million children get into quality programs. So the foundation I'm creating will actually help fund children who can't afford to be in a quality program. It's basically going to create scholarships for those children to attend high quality preschools. So I would use that to launch that. And yes, absolutely.
Here's the money. Here's
Yep,
the money.
that's
That's
it.
awesome. That's awesome. Okay, Dr. Rachel, we're driving down the road. You
Okay.
by yourself. What are you doing in your car?
Probably listening to a podcast or a book or something like that.
You're a podcast. So you're not like listening to AC/DC or anything, or your music person?
Sometimes it, it depends on my mood, but no, it would be probably, like dance music or trance or techno, something like that, if it was really upbeat. But usually I'm
Oh, you
trying
guys.
to listen to
I'd pay
something.
money to see you techno. I'd see you in a mosh pit. I'd just pay money. Hey, Sierra, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. I want you to explain to me what the qualities are of a good boss. And let's understand that maybe your executive producer is standing right next to you. But what are the characteristics of a good boss?
I think characteristics of a good boss are someone who you can relate to on a level where it's a healthy amount of, like what you've been saying, personal, but also still being able to be a boss
Right.
in life and at work.
Yeah. I think a lot of it, thank you, girl. I think a lot of it too, when we share certain parts of it, there's a level of respect that bubbles, and it's amazing to kind of see it work in action when people start to listen, right? Listening is cyclical. We have 2 ears, 1 mouth, shut up, listen. But when we really listen and retain information, that when you're walking down the hallway, you can say, hey, how was that soccer game, whatever. But I think the respect level that pops up when you humanize yourself, right? Evelyn, we were talking about that. I want to dive back into your personal story, because you did go through quite an experience of really, truly caretaking, which I think, honestly, motherhood's hard enough, you guys out there, but when you're a true caretaker of your parents or somebody else, a spouse or whatever, and especially if it's elongated, a long-term, chronic versus an acute situation. And so you were doing that while simultaneously being a mom and a friend and a daughter and a business owner. So what's one of the biggest things that you shared with staff or anybody that's, in your report to triangle there, or tree? What did you share? How much did you share?
That's when I had to just become transparent. I mean, I don't know if I could have not been transparent at that point. The trauma I was going through, it was prolonged. It was 3 years altogether of the intense, 5 years of the illness, but intense for 3 years. And just to put it in perspective, it was literally like going from being a wife to a mom to your husband.
Right.
So and my husband kept, like, every nurse he had, he would fire or they would quit because he wasn't having it. He was very difficult. So it put me in a position where I had no choice. And I think my just mental fatigue and just what I was going through was so overwhelming that I had no choice but to be completely transparent.
To be visible. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I have to say, though, the way people stepped up for me was absolutely amazing. I had a business coach. I always have a business coach. I am a business coach. I always have one. Highly recommend it. And even their coaching company, when I just was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to navigate this as an owner. The owner of the company actually said, you know what, use my staff. Let's get together, use my staff for this company. And then for my other company, my staff just really stepped up to the point that they would just tell me, you need to go home. We've got this. And it just like the amount of love I was shown, and the amount of help when you allow people to help you is just next level. So, and I think that's where I learned the power of transparency, of just showing them, and even financially. I mean, I'm at the point now where every year I show my entire staff my P&Ls, my balance sheet. We go through my company's financials so they can see exactly the health of our company, what I'm making, what is going on, how it's performing. And I've just, now I see the power of that, and how it just really connects them and gives them more buy-in. It makes them see that you're human just like them.
And that's
And
what I think is so important about storytelling, right? So it can
yes,
seem like such an irrelevant topic. So, you know, for instance, if somebody's going through some mental health stuff or an eating disorder stuff, when you share that topic that maybe has nothing to do with anyone, right?
yes,
That's at your staff or clients or coworkers, but the fact that it humanizes you and shows vulnerabilities and shows that you got through it, you can sell your character
yeah,
without selling yourself, which is so gross.
yeah,
It's so gross to be like, oh, I'm this and that, you know, it's like
yeah,
you're able to, they can dissect all of those and go, man, she's compassionate. I should respect her. She is dedicated, you know, all of those things. Rachel, I was just going back to your story in the book. What's interesting in watching your evolution for the last couple of years is the stories you wrote in Fourfold Formula, which is the first of, I co-authored a book series with Dr. Marcus Wettstein, and the first one was called Fourfold Formula. And it's really based on my trademarked All Things Wellness Wheel, which has 24 spokes of really how to balance your life, and how if you have any puncture in one of your spokes or areas of your life, you're flat. I mean, it's going to happen. It's funny because it's a metaphor, but Evelyn, you just shared that's exactly what happened. She had one flat, and the one flat was really in, it wasn't even organization, but it was just relationships or reaching out or coping skills or emotions. And that spoke over here affected like a blowout. It just affected. But what I was thinking, Rachel, with your story is you were actually sharing something with overworking and family business, and I can do it all. I mean, you were lifting things and taking calls. I mean, you were just a jack of all trades. But what evolved out of that over the last few years of watching you is you ended up, you know, you got your own radio show, you've written your own, you know, best-selling book, and just that evolution of how just sharing a story is how you and I connected. It's how Evelyn and I connected, right? So what are your thoughts on how was that when you shared your story? Did you tell anybody at work or professionally that you put that story out there? And the first one that you wrote was really personal. That was, you know, your health, your weight journey in the sense of, you know, so did you tell anybody that it was published and hey, go read this, or did you keep it on the DL?
So yeah, not too many people. I mean, I did advertise obviously that I was going to be in the book, but I didn't really say what the story was going to be about. You know, family members, obviously, and friends, I did give them copies, but I never really said, you know, hey, this is a story about, you know, my weight loss journey. And you know, my own book, obviously, I did promote that a lot, and it has some very personal stories in there too. Kind of starts off with one.
Right.
And you know, now sometimes when I talk to people, and I'll hear someone say like you know, for instance, someone the other day was saying that their daughter was struggling with weight and things like that. And I'm like, oh, I should really give you a copy of my book. You know,
No, you're right. I
you
was
know,
both of you guys. It's interesting because even at home, if you are working your butt off at home, toughest job, just saying, especially with COVID, you're then become a teacher. But no matter what your job is on this planet, your stories help build content. Like Rachel has a pathway now in actual coaching content. You know, Evelyn started out with a personal interest, like I'm going to tackle this early childhood education, and it's evolved into blank. And so when you can cross those stories, like you were just saying, Dr. Rachel, it's like handing that book out. Sometimes you can do it without saying anything, right? You can say, or catch this story, and if they come back, or whatever. But do you guys feel comfortable with that? Because I know, Evelyn, you've had your medical journey, your narcoleptic. Have you shared that story? Like your TED
Yes,
Talker?
no, yes. I don't share the narcolepsy story as much as my journey with my husband. And I've actually had a huge weight loss. Like I've actually lost 160 pounds in my life. So that isn't something I share very often either. But I think the
Amazing.
reason, like for me with the sharing of my husband's story was when I was bouncing, like after he passed away, I had a really hard time bouncing back. And there was a moment, there was a literal moment in my life where I woke up one morning and I just didn't want to get out of bed. I thought to myself, you know what? Why bother? I can sell both my companies. My house was almost paid off. And I decided like, I could live the rest of my life and not work. So why bother? And I literally had that thought and I contemplated it for a while, like to sell the companies and just drift through life. And I had another widow reach out to me. And at this point, my husband had been gone for about 12 weeks. And she just, it must have been in response to a Facebook post or something, because she reached out to me on Messenger and it just said something like, I totally understand the pain you're in right now. My husband's cup still sits in the same place. His clothes are still in the closet and all these things. And I just like, oh, finally someone feels and understands what I'm going through. And I messaged her back and said, well, thank you so much. How long has your husband been gone? And she said 8 years. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't let that become me. I cannot be this person 8 years from now. And then I tear up just thinking about it. My son came in and he was 17 at the time. And I looked at him and I realized I can't do this to you. And then I just sat down and started journaling. And I realized in that moment that I am literally the author of my story. And I thought to myself, I'm writing it right now. I'm living it. This is it. And the next year of my life, I get to write my story the next 2 years. And at that point, I just wanted to focus on a year. That was it. I just was like a year. And so I sat down and asked myself, if you were making you are the author now. This is your story. You are the author. And in a year, who do you want to be? Right. Who do you want your children to see you as? Who do you want to emerge as? And then I broke that down on, okay, what does this person need to do? How does she need to show up? What characteristics does she need to have?
Right. That's good.
And then I wrote myself a letter thanking myself for being that person. And I literally just, thank you for, and I got such details like, thank you for taking a shower. Thank you for not selling your companies, for showing back up to work, for just taking these baby steps, for honoring yourself. And I sealed it, intended to read it in a year, but that letter kept me going all year. I ended up
being your own cheerleader. Yeah.
Yeah. And
not being judged about, I've been saying this lately, is don't judge me off the chapter that you just started to read. Yes. Right? Because you just walk in on this chapter of whatever's going on. And, I don't care if you're 50, 60, and all of a sudden you're very successful and you're doing such a great job. You should have seen me in 1989. It's, which is true story. But, the other thing is, I think we're doing a really big disservice by not sharing our stories and not being authentic and transparent. And if you guys listening can switch this around and not look at the internal vulnerabilities and the fear factor, because guess what? Unless you're dying, you ain't dying. Like you ain't going to die by telling a story unless you're really like legit dying. So I don't want to downplay that. But if your children are watching you and the neighbor is watching you and the grocery store gal who's always saying, God, she's got it together, man. She always looks good. Doesn't matter what time. Everybody's watching. Like Evelyn said, everybody already knows. She don't need to tell them anything. They already know what's going on. But the disservice is not listening and not sharing our own stories because, I know, Rachel, that epidemiology, we've talked about this, is just this it's bubbling. It's this buzzword that people we're starting to ask more questions like, what's that? What's the genetic pattern? What do you mean there's a thing called real blueprint? I thought it was kind of fluffy. but we're doing a disservice by not changing those generations of talking about emotions and getting that crap out of the body that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Storytelling affects the body.
absolutely. There was research a few months ago that started to come out, where it's showing, the epigenetic changes that trauma makes in the body. And then just going through some therapeutic process and how that creates epigenetic changes. And, we have transgenerational epigenetics, and that trauma can actually be passed on to future generations. So if you're a young woman and thinking about having children and you haven't dealt with any of the traumas or emotional things that have happened to you, that could be passed on to the next generation. So it's definitely something that people are thinking about, even in preparing for pregnancy. What are my epigenetics and how can I clear that palette, if you like, as much as possible to change that? Because sometimes I say in the show, what affects our epigenetics? Everything, everything that we do. We're constantly, our genetics. Yes, there's genetics that we're born with, and Evelyn is a great example of that. She was born with narcolepsy, but it didn't show itself. And what happened is there's switches on the top, if you like, of our genetics. That's our epigenome. And those can be either turned on or turned off. And what happened was that she put so much stress on her system, she turned those switches on. Now she spent a lot of time trying to turn those switches back down. Not that she's free of it, but without medication to live a life that's less stressful, we can really dim those things. So really it's, when we, I was saying this to the other day, for me, health is the one thing that if you work on it, makes everything else in life better, easier, right? And so it should be the forefront of everything that the people do. Their consideration is, I'm working. How much are you working? How much are you taking on? What are you being responsible for? What are you not being responsible for in your health as well? Because do that, right? Not being responsible for ourselves. Because in a lot of ways, when I was being over responsible for everybody else, I wasn't being responsible for myself and putting myself first and my health first. And I love that about epigenetics, because even the smallest things about what we eat, what we drink can really even affect that and affect our mental clarity. And what's hard for me right now is, because I see so many people who are sick, and we've got obesity and pediatric diabetes is rampant, and it just doesn't seem that there's enough that is going on to change that. And what we're seeing with mental health disorders and things like that, it's all coming from that metabolic changes that we're, that are going on. And it's hard for me to watch that and not get on top of a mountain and say, come on, people.
Well, and that it all circles back to stories. And I know everybody's going to get sick of me for saying that over and over, but our bodies tell stories. It's not just our mouths, and you can sit and watch your neighbor. My office is here. I work from home and I look across the street, and I'm not being Mrs. Kravitz. It's just you are aware. So certain people come home at certain times, certain people walk a dog, certain people do whatever. And there's stories. Our epigenetics, if they're telling stories, you guys, and we're not sharing. I mean, I love the example you just brought up, Dr. Rachel, is that in just listening and observing and watching Evelyn's story, just right here in this time we've been together, to be able to connect to that and cycle back. Evelyn's going to probably walk away with some little tidbit of that, right? And it continues that learning and application and all of that stuff. Okay, you guys.
Can I add to that really quick? So I have to say, Rachel, too, that my education background is also in psychology. And there was a moment where I started asking, why do we treat adults instead of focusing on the children, where we can really just focus on what do they need, right? And so a lot of the programs that I teach, and the reason I became a childcare business coach is because I see that in early childhood education, where we are actually forming these parts of the brain, and we're passing on what I refer to as generational curses. That is literally a lot of times what we're passing on to these children. But in those first 6 years of life, where our executive brain functions are actually forming, we can literally intentionally go and reprogram a lot of the, well, not reprogram, we're not programming.
Right.
Right. We're
Deprogramming.
as parents, yeah, we're correctly programming instead of the reprogramming these generational mindsets that end like put us in positions where we think we have to overwork, right? Where we think this is what's expected of us, where we don't trust. And that is when all of this was formed, in that early stages of life. So it's kind of where I kind of do the opposite of what you do. And now I'm trying to spread that through other childcare programs. Since so many children are in childcare, I figured childcare is where we can really infiltrate the home.
Absolutely.
And correct a lot of these issues.
Absolutely. Dr. Rachel, where can people find you and send questions your way? What's the contact?
So I have a my website, drrachelsweet.com. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. You can certainly find me there too. But yeah, drrachelsweet.com. You'll find my podcast and everything else you need to know about me there.
Yeah. Evelyn, how about you? How can we find your face?
You can find me at childcarebusinessprofessionals.com. And I'm also all over social media. I do a free live show every Monday on YouTube, Facebook, pretty much everywhere. And I also have a podcast. If you just search Evelyn Knight or the Child Care Business Coach, you will find me.
Good job. Okay, we're going to tie up today. I'm going to ask these guys a call to action. So again, we've been talking about, what is the boundary? And you get to create it. We all get to create our own boundaries, but I'd like you to just step back today and say, what is it that I could bring of value with any personal story that shares some of my transparencies in any environment that's appropriate? Right? I mean, we don't want to walk in and share something that's not professional, but what would be your call to action, Rachel, so people can take a baby step this next week and being more vulnerable about storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, if there's something medical or health related that you're struggling with, I mean, tell somebody about it, and they may be able to share something super easy that could help with that.
So good. And the people that you connect with, even if posting open-ended questions like that people aren't real sure if it's about you or not, solicits so much conversation.
Yeah.
Evelyn, what about you? What's a call to action that you would give everybody this week to think about?
I would challenge everybody out there to be okay with having your own back. It is okay to have your own back and not to put yourself last.
What a novel idea, right? What a novel idea. All right. So what are you going to commit to me? Okay. So Dr. Rachel, what are you going to commit to me in the world that you're going to do to share a little bit of you in an appropriate environment this week? What are you going to do?
Wow, this week. I probably do a little reel or something and tell something about myself, like on Instagram.
No, that's all. See, good challenge. Okay, Evelyn, what are you going to commit to me?
Well, ironically, tomorrow I've been asked to go and do a testimonial speaking engagement. So it is something where I'm going to have to be very raw and transparent and vulnerable in front of a group of about 50 strangers. So something I'm really leaning into as my speaking career gets bigger and bigger. We're just leaning into being vulnerable and letting people see me.
Absolutely. And again, it can come in a kind of open forum type way. If you guys have social media out there, put something every once in a while on your social media that's, I've been doing that because I'm working on a project called Unsheltered, which is going to be storytelling from those who are homeless. And I'm working on it with Dennis Patoko. And it's taken on a global, when we first did our first general publicity, all of a sudden in 12 hours, it was in India being publicly spoken about. So the difference being is that if people can't get their stories to me, I'm going to go find them. And so putting together a team, if you want to find out more about that on allthingswellness.com, and the authors tab has all the projects that I've been working on. But my point is, with the storytelling and open-ended, I had asked a question like, how do you feel about hate? right? Well, obviously I have my own story about hate and I have my own opinions I'd like to share, but it's such a different approach than saying, this is what I think, or this is what's happened to me. So you guys out there, be willing to ask open-ended questions, be a really, really good listener. You're going to, treat others with respect. All those mantras your grandmother said, treat others with respect and they'll treat you with respect, listen and they'll listen. Let me give you a couple more housekeeping things. For the first 5 people that email me after the show is done, Peggy@allthingswellness.com, I will get you out some autographed books of our most recent one, Win the Wellness War. Again, you can hop onto my authors tab on allthingswellness.com. I have a book coming up right now, Wellness GPS, where you can find out more to submit your stories, just like these gals did. Submit your story. It's a great way to get your feet wet. If you're not a writer, we help you. Everybody has a story to tell. You're not too vanilla. Everybody has a story. You can change and save lives. Another project that I'm working on that I'm super excited about, you guys, is my children's series books that I'm writing with my son. And so our first one comes out in September. It's called Tanner Tells Tales. And the tales is about truth and accountability and love and emotion and support. And it's all his real life story. And we're going to be writing multiple books. So that is coming up. So I'm going to end this show with that thought that you have been listening to stories since you were in the womb. And you guys have been sharing stories, and it stops. And now, especially with social media, not a lot of people are holding books. And if you're an audio person, find books out there, but we got to keep telling stories and sharing stories. And all right, I want you to join me every second and fourth Wednesday of the month, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And upcoming on September 13th, Dennis Potoko, as I said, we're writing the Unsheltered book series together. And Christopher Rausch will also be on the show. He was homeless for 4 years as a teenager with his mom. And he's writing a book called You and Me, Kid. So again, you guys, thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Evelyn, for coming on board. And I will talk to you guys really soon. Goodbye, Sierra.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Coach Peggy Show, all things wellness with Coach Peggy Willms. Tune in live on transformationtalkradio.com, where Coach Peggy talks all things wellness, not just nutrition and fitness, but about all things, about your money, your lifestyle, your beliefs, and even romance. The Coach Peggy Show, bold, badass, and never half in. For more information or to connect with Coach Peggy, visit allthingswellness.com.